to keep yourself in genre shape. So let's get going on the first part, because in this first presentation, I actually have it in 2 presentations, just so you know. Normally, this is a 3-hour presentation, and I was going to just smush it all into one presentation in 90 minutes for everyone, and then I realized as I was doing that, I was taking out some of the very key things that were on some of the slides. So I've kept the same number of slides. I'm just going to be taking out the longer book talks on each author. And so before I get going, what I normally do is go through each genre and then talk about 2 main authors. I'm going to show you those authors today, but all of the talks I would have given will be based off of the author statements on novelists. So you can go and get those yourself. What I really want for you today is that you're going to use these slides after I talk to help you keep working and figure things out. But right now, while we're going through this live today, there's like a 3-fold thing I want from you. The first one, which isn't part of that 3-fold, is to sit back and just sort of take it all in. But number 1, I'm going to go through all the genres quickly. And I want you to note if your opinion of the state the genres are in today is similar to the one I'm presenting, because the one I'm presenting is up to date with the basic trends and what readers expect. Number 2, I want you to think about, do you have any personal knowledge in these genres? And we're going to get into how to help readers of genres you don't have personal knowledge in, no matter how little you know, and the second part. But make a note of that. And then third, and this is the most important part of this equation, which is often forgotten when people do trainings like these. Take the first 2 things I said, and then think about your patrons. Which of these genres, as I go through them, are you getting the most questions about? When we are all done, when you're going to make your own little training plan on how to keep your genres and genre muscles in shape, I want you to think about where that largest gap is. Where is that gap in your personal knowledge and your personal reading versus what your patrons are asking for? And if there are genres with huge gaps there, you can either use the comments on the blog, on the webinar today, or you can let Joe and Louise know through email or in your surveys about this program. And you know, we could do more trainings about those specific genres, because that's where we really need to focus. It's not so much where you do or do not know things. It's where that biggest gap between what you know and the questions you're getting happens that we have problems. So let me go through and we'll talk about that as we go through. All right. Once you are over the very basic reader's advisory hurdle of understanding how to talk to patrons about books and the basics of using appeal to make book suggestions, the next big hurdle is unlocking the key to the secrets of genre. Now, working with genre and genre readers can sometimes feel like magic, but I promise you, you do not need occult powers or a crystal ball to do it. I do have a plan. Today, in this first part of the presentation, I'm going to demystify that genre for you. The second part, I'm going to demystify working with the readers, so it's a 2-fold. And that's what we're really going to do. So we're going to spend most of the first 45 minutes on this basic bullet point here, the first one, a rundown of the major genres, their major appeal, and just the bare minimum authors you need to know. I am going to give you examples of genre conventions and how they really work at this time. And then not to leave you hanging, before we move on to working with the readers, which will be mostly of the second part, the second 45 minutes, I'm going to show you a basic talk to you basically about novelists training for genres and how it's quick and easy. And then I'm going to share with you, when we get into demystifying genre readers, some of my tips and tricks to staying in genre shape. But let's start here. Okay. First, a very quick note. How I've organized this lecture is based on this book right in front of you by Joyce Saricks, her RA Guide to Genre Fiction. You know, I was involved with the creation of this as a reader of the original manuscript when Joyce changed the way genres were organized. And then for 7 years, the 2 of us taught genres this way at Dominican University using this structure. And it really worked well. And it's a great way to think about genre in a way that mimics the way patrons think. It's not in the way we used to think. And I've turned out hundreds of, literally at this point, hundreds of practitioners out there in libraries who think about genre this way. And it's just a good way to reinforce the framework. But what I want to really talk about here that you need to notice right from the start is that it's a little bit less intuitive than the way sometimes genres are grouped. And the biggest example can be seen with the fact that often the speculative genres, science fiction, fantasy, and horror, are taught together. And in this case, they're separated. Again, I'm going to talk about the way genres are based on their appeal factors in these groupings, the most important appeal factor. And you're going to get a sense of these genres and a new way to organize them in your mind. Okay, everyone should have a copy of this book, and even though it's older, the way the genres are organized is the important part here, not necessarily the examples in the book. Okay. And I do want to comment, too, that, when I would teach this at Dominican, we would spend 3 hours on just one set of those genres. So I want to make sure that you understand that this is just a bare minimum, but a way for you to understand where you are. Again, that threefold situation I talked about at the beginning. It's going to work best for you if you think about it that way. All right, but before we go forward, I want to take one quick step back. There's the official definition of genre. If you use that link and click there, again, the slides are available easily, and Joe will make them available with the recording. But what is genre? The definition is technically, it's a category of artistic composition, as in music or literature, characterized by similarities in form, style, or subject matter. Let me make this clearer, though. The way I visualize genre is that it is the boxes we create in order to organize the huge mass of all fiction into manageable chunks. So, for example, we can learn to think about a typical romance, and we can learn what the most common appeal factors are, look at the most popular authors and how they use the genre conventions to win over readers, assess trends, and then apply it to all the books in that genre, and then even apply it to other genres. This is important because these are boxes. They are not made of solid, unmovable walls. In fact, I actually prefer the file cabinet metaphor. So you think of all of fiction as in one file cabinet, and the genres each have a hanging folder with loose papers that are inside the hanging files. The papers are going to be your books within the genre. So you can easily open a drawer and take out a piece of paper, make a copy of it, and then put it in a different genre file so it can live in 2 genre files. Or move it completely if it's not a good fit. The point here is that I'm going to talk about genre in ways that may seem like absolutes. But I am well aware that this is not the truth of how authors write, or even more importantly for us, how readers read. In fact, one of the biggest trends in all fiction today is the blurring of genres, and I'm going to spend time in the second 45 minutes on that. But understanding these boxes or file folders will help you think in more generalizations. Those categories I had on that first screen, we're going to go through them. Those are sort of your broad boxes, and then within that you have the files. You will be able then, if you think in these generalizations, to anticipate what appeal a book holds for a reader better, which means you're going to have an easier time helping patrons. It's a process that builds off of itself. Another common complaint I hear when I talk about genre is that some people feel like genre distinctions ghettoize a book into a place that it can never leave from. I'd like to assure you again that I'm using genre as a guide. In fact, the way I'm grouping genres today will help you not to ghettoize them, as you're going to see. Also, I'm talking about genres as they're being used by today's authors. It's important to remember that genre is not static. In fact, quite the opposite. Genres and readers change over time. A great way to see this is that a Nora Roberts romance from 2000 is very different from one she is writing in 2015, and is very different from ones that were written in the 80s. The point then today is to show the very best of what each genre has to offer, and I'll be explaining the conventions each genre uses. And they all have conventions, even the high and mighty literary fiction. But it is also for you to understand why fans love the genres. They are fans because they embrace these characteristics and look for them in their favorite books. So you should learn what those conventions are and embrace them too. You're not necessarily embracing them for yourself as a reader because maybe you don't like these conventions. And I'm going to pick on myself a lot here and the fact that I don't know a lot about, or I don't read a lot of romance, but the fact that I'm really good at helping romance readers. And that's the thing, because I'm embracing the conventions and why the readers love them. That's how you get a better understanding of why the reader in front of you loves the books. Because the most important thing to remember today over everything is, it's not about you. It's about your readers. That's why you're here. You're not here to learn how you can like books better. You're here for the readers, which is why I said that third part is the most important. Where is the gap in your knowledge based on the questions you're getting? Because it's the questions you're getting that is way more important than what you like to read. Now, There is a little link here for humor. We're going to skip that today to have the shortened version, but go and look at it. It's a great way to look at genre. It's from Fiction Al, and you can go through again on your own time and look at that. Let's move right in. The first category we had were the adrenaline genres. Now, the reason that these are here together is because pacing is the most important element in all these books. These are engrossing stories that pull readers in from the first few pages and keep them turning the pages until the very end. They often take place in a short time frame with the days, hours, or even minutes at the start of chapters to underline the urgency. Even if the time frame is longer, they feel as if they move us along very quickly, faster than normal time. These books are also very cinematic. They have happy resolved endings, and most importantly, our protagonists are safe. And those genres are adventure, thriller, suspense, and romantic suspense. So right away, I want you, this is for the first example, I'm going to take more time to remind you what I want you to do. Think about those genres. Think about your experience with them. In general, all of them. We're going to break down each one. Then think about which ones of those you read. Then think about which ones you're getting questions on. All right, let's move to adventure. All right, here we go. Adventure are heroes, stories of heroes on a mission. They're usually series, and they have exotic locales, or they could be war stories too. We have this hero who overcomes great peril, defeats insurmountable obstacles, and saves the world. It's always saving the world. So if you can look at my examples, you can see that. Readers follow the hero as they go through this. Think about just the fast-paced, nonstop action. I like to call it the 24 TV series of books. You know, it just keeps going. It never stops. There's not even time to go to the bathroom. Or the MacGyver version where you use a gum and a paperclip to save the world. This is what we're talking about. They do mostly have male protagonists, although books like a series like Dan Brown start to add sort of a female sidekick, and even Clive Cussler's doing that. And those are our two. Clive Cussler would be your benchmark, and Dan Brown would be your current. And I'm going to make a comment here on adventure that I won't make on the others. But the idea here is that there are two authors, the benchmark and somebody who describes the genre as it is today in each slide. Now, you can easily go to Novelist and read about these authors. I made sure I included ones that have a 100-word author statement. They're short and they hit the major things about the author. And that is what you can learn to learn more about them. But you need to know these authors that I'm putting on the screen. If one of them shows up that you don't know, you need to write that down and go find out something right away. All right, so that's your benchmark and your current author. Let's move on to thrillers. Thrillers are the largest set in this subgenre, of this set of genres. These books center on a particular profession, excuse me. They, like espionage, medicine, or the law, which are the most popular. These books provide fast-paced stories with details and jargon of the profession, with the potential dangers faced by those involved in it. Unlike adventure, which is all about the hero and his mission, in the thriller, the hero is secondary to the action itself and the detail. Another common characteristic of these stories is that loner hero who operates under his own moral code, going up against big medicine, big government, big finance, etc. And then villains who seek power for their own ends. We're going to have extremely sympathetic heroes against very evil villains. It's very clear who's on which side here. And some popular subgenres, like I mentioned, that are really popular are medical, scientific, espionage, political, financial, legal, crime caper, techno thrillers. There's just quite a few. They often have a gritty and menacing tone, too. Even though our protagonist is going to be safe at the end, we definitely have a little bit grittier than what we've seen in the past. Maybe with some lighter ones back from the 1980s. And here's your benchmark. David Baldacci, I used to take him off the benchmark, but he's come back with Camel Club, and he has been benchmarked for many years. But the person who epitomizes why readers love thrillers today is clearly Daniel Silva. And he's a best-selling author who was a library bestseller before he was a real-world bestseller. Again, I hope you're paying attention to the basics. This is just an overview. I'm going to talk to you about how to turn this into more knowledge later. Okay, suspense. I love talking about suspense because it is such a unique story. Lots of books are labeled suspense by publishers, but these books, suspense is the most important element. Suspense is not about the things that happen. It's about the things that might happen. There is always a prologue at the start of a suspense book. And you know what I'm talking about. It goes right in the beginning. It puts you, it's the first pages, but it puts you somewhere in the middle of the story. And it provides that super menacing atmosphere. You know something's bad's going to happen. You go back to chapter 1, and things seem fine, but in your mind, you know that that's coming. And you read faster, and it makes you already worried about what might happen before you've even had anything happen. Then the genre has strict confines, too, because it is a story in which tension builds. We know something's going to happen. Our hero or our heroine are in peril. We know because we see the villain's thoughts, too. This forces readers to read faster, to see what will happen with that telescoped time frame, sometimes with timestamps, something that needs to happen right away, or something terrible is going to happen. It speeds it all up to that final showdown of good versus evil. When we talk about suspense, I know I'm cheating here and giving you 3 books, but there are really 3 types or 2 types of suspense. We have the hard-edge suspense, which would be experienced by James Patterson. And by the way, if you have little old ladies who tell you they don't like violence in their books and James Patterson's their favorite author, they're lying to you. They're pretty violent. And Mary Higgins Clark is softer suspense, not as much blood and violence. But the person who epitomizes suspense as it is being written today is Lee Child in his Jack Reacher series. And then finally in the adrenaline genres, we have romantic suspense. This has more violence and sex and strong language than regular suspense, especially regular softer suspense. And we have strong women in difficult situations with that escalating suspense, explicit violence, and strong sexual themes. It is suspense with a romantic element. We always have a threatened heroine. We always have the villain's point of view. And the romance really is just as important, and that is a difference with regular suspense. One of the other notable things about romantic suspense, which is a little bit different than suspense, which is almost all contemporary with some historical, is that we have a very broad time frame. So you can have a Nora Roberts writing a right now suspense, and she is your benchmark, or writing as J.D. Robb and having a futuristic romantic suspense. And you can have Julie Garwood, who's a great example of romantic suspense today, and she could be now mostly contemporary, but people can write in the past, present, future. And it's read by men and women, which you don't see as much with regular romance. But in romantic suspense, we do have equal readers of men and women. Okay, phew, that was genres of the adrenaline. Again, all about pacing. I'm going to show you how to learn more about them. That's just to give you a sense of where we are. Now we're going to talk about genres of the intellect. And this is where I said it starts to make more sense. See my science fiction set popping up here. It's not grouped with horror and fantasy, and we'll talk about why. Because all of these genres, literary fiction, science fiction, psychological suspense, and mystery, are books that are puzzles of some sort. They pose a quandary. Maybe they delve into social and ethical issues, or they're a more straightforward whodunit. Pacing here is not a common factor. So with adrenaline, we only were talking about pacing as the thing that united those genres. People who like fast-paced like those genres. Then we have specifics within them. Here, we're talking about people who are sort of solving a puzzle of some sort. Again, genres of the intellect. Some can be slow here, and some can be more rapid, and it will change based on the books. So this is what we're doing, and we're going to start with literary fiction because it does have genre conventions. It's critically claimed, often prize-winning fiction, characterized by a distinctive writing style that's often inventive, rich and demanding, multi-layered, experimental, or slow, or showing technical virtuosity. It's not slow. I actually think it's not. Sorry if that was a slip. Books in this category focus more on character than on plot, and they deal in nuances. They're intellectually interesting and rewarding and prompt a high degree of interaction between the reader and the book. The storylines are generally deep, provocative, and serious, and they really wrestle with the universal dilemmas. They're more measured in pace, but readers want that because they want to delve into these things. They can have a darker tone and a complex style. These are the books that are featured in major reviewing sources, and they are often books that get used for book discussions. That's the way I like to think about them. A benchmark is Ian McEwan, and I think that's a great benchmark because atonement is often used for book discussions, and he's a good example. And I have Ann Patchett as my example of current writing of literary fiction, and the main reason I have this on here is because we're Illinois librarians, and this is Bel Canto, and if you don't know, this is my plug to let you know that Bel Canto happens to be about opera. and it's being turned into the world premiere of the opera at the Lyric Opera this winter here in Chicago. And actually, I think it's later this month. If you go on the Chicago Public Library website, Ann Patchett will be there discussing her book and turning it into an opera. And it is a free event downtown. So that is my plug there. But Ann Patchett is a great example of literary fiction in its popular form as it's written today. Let's look at science fiction. This is my favorite way to teach it. I get so excited because it is speculative, but I'm putting it with these other books that I think it fits with more. If we think about helping readers, we can make connections better to other books. And it's going to help you when we talk about all the genre blending that's happening later. So science fiction is speculative fiction set now or in the future, as opposed to fantasy and its use of magic. The speculative part is achieved through science. It is speculative fiction that's based on a plausible extrapolation from our current understanding of science. So it may seem like it can't happen today, but it's grounded in today's scientific theory. Many science fiction writers will cross over to fantasy, but science fiction's basic appeal at its heart is that it's speculative, that's important, as opposed to literary, which isn't, but it could be action-adventure, it could be slower paced, and all in the mind. However, no matter the pace, the largest appeal factor is that it considers moral, social, and ethical issues while exploring philosophical, technical, and intellectual questions. As a result, science fiction is a place where challenging and often controversial ideas are discussed, much like they are in literary fiction. The context and the setting might be out of the ordinary, but the ideas the author is batting around are really of its day that it's written. These readers are not all Trekkies. They are sophisticated readers. Intellect comes in here that these are smart books that talk about issues like genetic engineering, totalitarianism, and the increasing use of machines and technology in everyday life. There are a lot of series here, too, so we have to make sure we understand that. Also, the big benchmarks I'm going to give here are authors that do hard versus soft science fiction, because those are your two big areas. So a great series for people who liked The Martian and want to read more is Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy. They're there on your screen. Every single one of those, actually both authors I'm using have won the Hugo and the Nebula, which are the biggest awards in science fiction and fantasy. One's given by the critics and one's given by the fans. And these are big honors. These are books you have in your collection. So this is the Mars trilogy about terraforming Mars, which would be more hard science fiction. And then Connie Willis, who's really the queen of taking historical fiction and putting in a time travel element from the future into it to make it science fiction. And Blackout and All Clear are two books in her series about World War II with that. And those are great softer science fiction reads. Also, both excellent for literary fiction readers. And I bet you already are seeing your literary fiction readers reading The Martian in droves, and there's an example there. Psychological suspense. All you have to do is think about Alfred Hitchcock. These works build tension, but unlike regular suspense, physical actions and terrors are replaced by mental fears. These novels produce a chill, they play with our minds in disturbing ways, and leave us wondering about characters as well as plot resolutions. Like horror, authors here create nightmare situations that the protagonists and readers seek to escape. They want to, though. But unlike horror, these are internal psychological monsters rather than supernatural ones. Here you can find tons of stalking serial killers, unreliable narrators. These are going to be written in a more of a literary style with a measured pace, unlike regular suspense. And character and mood come to the center stage. Everybody should know Gillian Flynn. There's Sharp Objects, her first book. She would be our benchmark right now in psychological suspense with the number of books that say, you know, just like Gone Girl or something to that effect. And another book you should know, author, although the Dexter series has just been completed, this is a great example, the Dexter series, of ways that psychological suspense can take that unreliable narrator to an extreme, because in those books, we are following our protagonist as a serial killer who kills serial killers, and we love him. And how does that make us feel? Weird. So that's a great sense of what psychological suspense is all about. Okay, mystery involves a puzzle, of course, because they are a puzzle. The author provides the clues to the solution, but attempts to obscure the information so the puzzle isn't solved too easily. The puzzle involves a crime, usually murder, and there's a body. There's an investigator, whether professional or amateur, who solves the puzzle of whodunit. The mystery then tracks the investigation and the detectives' lives. Mystery readers love solving along with the protagonist. However, there are so many mysteries that the appeal needs to be further developed in an interview. This is just the tip of the iceberg, too. Some people like cozies, some people like mysteries with animals, some like hard-edged or hard-boiled or police procedural. I could go on all day. And then not even to imagine the historical versus contemporary versus future mysteries. There are many, many websites and reference books, and I'm going to give you some of those later, but mystery readers help themselves well. When they run out of books in their favorite series, that's when we need to be ready to help move them along, and that's what I'll focus on when we talk about working with readers later with you. But we have to make sure that we understand that the pacing in mystery is not as fast as in suspense, thriller, all those adrenaline genres, because it starts compelling and very character-centered, and it really then slowly becomes relentless. Our two examples, I put Michael Connelly on here as a great benchmark example because although this is a police-driven professional PI with Harry Bosch, he does leave the police force at some point and then goes back, but it's also got that hard-boiled feel, and it's got that loner PI feel and the police, and they're very popular series. And then also Louise Penny, great example, and again, you can go into novelists to read about what they do well and what to expect in terms of appeal for those authors, and read links. Okay, let's move on. We only have two more categories before we can start actually talking about readers again. I know this is a lot of information. The slides are there to be your notes for later. This is just to give you a sense of making sure you know these genres, the very basics of what they're doing. And please, if there are genres that you know nothing about, write them down and share them with Joe and Louise, and we can work on those in greater detail. Okay, last two categories, genres of the emotion. I love this too because it's romance, horror, gentle reads, and women's fiction. These horror and gentle reads feel like they have nothing in common. They actually do, because all these books are about how they make you feel. I love using this grouping structure for these because it shows how useful it is to think about genre this way. If you can understand today why romance and horror are similar, then you get the idea of genre that I'm trying to sell you, and you get how readers read. You're going to stop using those the genre categories to box them up and close them and put them away and say you can only read romance and only like romance. You can't like anything else. And you're going to start using genre as a tool. You're going to embrace it to help you. All right? So they're all about the way you feel. Of course, they're different emotions, but it's about how you feel. They all liberally use adjectives and colloquial language to make you feel real emotion. Again, different adjectives, but they're all in that way of focusing on your emotions. Every single one of these genres also has a sympathetic protagonist. That's actually one of the biggest differences between horror and psychological suspense. You might have readers who cross over, but the fact of the matter is in psychological suspense, you're not always meant to sympathize with the protagonist. Often they're an unreliable narrator, and you are sort of observing and how that makes you feel. In horror, most of the time, there's a protagonist that you are supposed to follow. There's a coming-of-age theme, and you want to be a part of it and a part of their lives. But let's move on to romance first. Oh, this is my favorite picture slide. If you think that there's no 50 women's lives. Here, the love relationship is central, and everything else is just peripheral frame. Don't get me wrong, people love the frames. There are lots of interesting frames in romance, and some readers read for specific frames. But the love story is the thing, and this is the boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy and girl reunite and get married. Or if they're, single-sex ones, just, change it up. But that's the idea. Two people meet, they fall in love, something happens, and they have to get back together. There's a lot of paperback here, which is important to know. I did not put Nora Roberts on here because we already had her, but obviously she's huge here. And we cannot forget the huge influence of erotica. Here we have Susan Elizabeth Phillips, who is a very popular author in this area and writes contemporary romances. She's always been on the sexier side of romances. But the old cover, look at how nice it is with the Chicago sky skyline and the boat. The newer version has the boobs up straight there in center to remind you that, hey, I do this too. You're going to see that a lot in a lot of covers these days as they change. And then Julia Quinn, historical romances are extremely popular frame in romances. And she is one of the best. And there's a cover of one of her books. Again, you can go to Novelist to see more. Okay, now for something completely different. I try very hard not to spend too much time on horror, but for those of you who don't know, that I did write the book for ALA, the Horror Reader's Advisory. So this is my definition of horror. I'm not going to read it. You can read it while I'm talking. That's in that book. But similar to fantasy and science fiction, you have to suspend your disbelief. There is a character's quest, but it is a dark quest. Horror provokes terror with the ultimate goal of the book to scare the reader by manipulating his or her emotions. The atmosphere takes center stage over plot development here. Some of the most terrifying moments are achieved through suggestion rather than through a series of shocking scenes and brutality. Horror also allows for safe exploration of the dark side of humanity, similar to psychological suspense, because there is a powerful voyeuristic thrill for readers to explore that dark side. Horror also allows readers to face their own fears. Reading about a protagonist battling vampires or zombies empowers us to take action in our own lives, because our problems aren't that bad. You know, you watch Walking Dead and you're like, okay, my life is not as bad as 300 zombies coming after me. I can handle this. Horror also provides escape from the real horrors in life. And horror validates belief in the supernatural. Also, it's important to note that most horror is open-ended so that the horror can live on, the fear can stay alive. And there are many different horror subgenres with different appeal factors. But in my book, and this is still the case, I say that the two current kings of horror are Joe Hill and Jonathan Marbury, so you can take a look at those either on Novelist or in my book. I wrote both things, so that's fine, and see what they are up to. Gentle reads. I love talking about gentle reads because people don't always talk about them as a genre. They're not for horror fans always, and vice versa, although I happen to enjoy Jennifer Shiverini very well, so don't just assume people aren't going to read both. But these are books patrons refer to when they say they don't write books like they used to anymore. These books are timeless, nostalgic, and without explicit sex or violence. They are feel-good books. Even if they're in contemporary setting, they transfer us back to another time when things were simpler and slower. They're cheerful, hopeful stories told from a peaceful, soothing perspective. They also project a comfortable sense of well-being. They're generally lovely, satisfying books that reflect an uncomplicated but not unsophisticated lifestyle. These are not just Christian fiction, by the way. The fans, by the way, will not call them gentle reads, but listen to what they're asking for. Character-centered books with family and relationships. They're not really talking about romance, and they don't really mention social or moral issues, and they do say things like, you know, they don't write books like they used to anymore, or just a good, nice story. Here are two authors. Jennifer Shiverini started with The Quilter's Apprentice. She has other series now that are perfect on this. I call those sort of the smart gentle reads. They all are smart, but sometimes people working at the library think, again, that they're unsophisticated. And I'm trying to always point out books that are very sophisticated and worth time that are still gentle. And, of course, we all know about Nicholas Sparks. And he's a great example of it being heart-wrenching and making you cry, but still gentle. Okay, women's fiction is our last category here. I don't necessarily like doing this all the time because there is no men's fiction, but these are different than gentle reads and romance. They need to be talked about because these are books written and read primarily by women, which chronicle women and their lives and relationships with family, friends, and lovers, and explore the reaches of all women's lives, deal with the dynamics of their relationships that may or may not end happily, deal with their work situation, what's going on in their lives. The issues are going to be resolved at the end of these books, though. It's going to be those issues of homework and where they intersect. And they have unusual styles often. You can find this with diaries, instant messaging, blogging, ways to bring the story and make it closer. These authors follow women at various stages of lives as they grow, raise families, and relate to the world around them. The women who read these books are pulled into the shared emotions of the protagonist. So Jennifer Weiner's a great example, with starting with chick lit and moved through to becoming more mature as she ages. And then Jodi Picoult is also a great example of a different side of this. I call it families with issues. Okay, last set of genres before we can start talking about working with readers. Genres with a sense of place. These are genres in which the emphasis is on creating that strong sense of place. So we've had pacing, we've had solving a puzzle, or a quandary of some type, we've had emotions, and now we're dealing with place. This is when the frame is the most important element in fantasy, historical fiction, and westerns. Pacing is more measured in all of these books because they tend to be a little bit longer, maybe not westerns, although they're getting longer. But fans may disagree because they want all that detail and all that frame. So we need to make sure we understand that too. Let's talk about fantasy. It's speculative fiction with magic of some kind. It's the present of magic that makes it fantasy. Fantasy delves into relationships, deals with otherness of time and place, but exists in a world that could never be. Fantasy also frequently takes a familiar story, legend, or myth and adds a twist, bringing it to life again. Fantasy is often huge books in parts of large world-building series. I have the George R.R. Martin on the screen, and I have to shrink it to fit it in, and that's not even done yet. And so the details surrounding these worlds and building them and making them come to life is what readers love. There are books about the worlds. There are books about the places. There are maps made of fictional places, and there are entire websites devoted to these things. There are Wikipedias, like wikis on just worlds in these big fantasy series. There's also a wide range of readership here. Many adults read youth fantasy. Many youth read adult fantasy. In fantasy, there's usually black and white characters, and good triumphs over evil always. It may take 15 books, but they will. Think Lord of the Rings, think Harry Potter. Anyone who thought that Frodo wasn't going to destroy the ring and save the day, anyone who thought Voldemort was going to kill Harry Potter did not understand fantasy. Those would have been horror books then, because in fantasy, the good always wins. There might be a lot of sacrifices, and some people might die along the way, but good is always going to triumph. Again, there are many types with a range of how they're written, both in flowery language and simple language, and they're toned from very light to very, very dark, are all over the map. So we have George R.R. Martin. Of course, you should know about that series. Some people call it Game of Thrones because that's the name of the TV series, but the technical series name is A Song of Ice and Fire. And then Neil Gaiman's a great example because he writes at every age level, and he writes mostly standalones. So that's a great place to think about the standalone fantasy. Historical fiction. There's a wide range because it could be historical mystery, historical romance, or it could just be like a Geraldine Brooks book, which just takes one little historical time or interesting thing that happened. But they're best defined as novels set in the past, before the author's lifetime or experience. So old books written in their own time are not historical fiction. So Pride and Prejudice is not historical fiction. It was contemporary fiction of its time, written at its time, and it is now in the past. However, that being said, that is for me to tell you. If your patron comes in and saying, I want to read historical fiction like Pride and Prejudice, do not get in an argument with them about how it is not historical fiction. But I do want you to understand that difference because it makes a difference if an author today is looking back at the past versus Pride and Prejudice, which is really women's fiction, which I talked about. It's contemporary stories about living right now of its time, just set at a past time. So you might want to think about it that way. You might want to be matching your appeals when you work with the readers on the emotional pull of the story, not on the historical time period, which is why many contemporary stories use Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility as sort of a frame of reference, or even Romeo and Juliet stories. Okay, I'm off my soapbox there about historical fiction. But these books have serious respect for historical accuracy and detail, and historical fiction enhances the reader's knowledge of the past. The goal of historical fiction is to bring history to life in novel form. You can learn some history through these books, and that is a huge appeal factor for people. Overall, the appeal is in the accurate historical details about place, customs, belief, culture, society, habits, that frame, all that stuff that makes you feel like you're there. So accuracy is key. Historical fiction readers turn to that genre to sort of make history come alive from the inside, from the perspectives of individuals caught up in events from the past. it's important to also note that the characters must fit into the times of their stories. So you can't have women demanding equal rights in a 17th century story. Stories varied, and they can be centered on a time or an event or a place, and pacing is always moderate because there's a lot of detail, but it's compelling. People who like it don't find it slow in any way, shape, or form. Edward Rutherford is your example of someone who writes giant books that go back, you take a place. So here's Sarum, a novel of England. He has one about New York. He has one about Russia. He goes back to a place all the way back to when the place began, when people first came there, when the earth was formed in that place, and tells the story of that place through families. And then Geraldine Brooks, who writes shorter books about maybe something specific. In this case, People of the Book, it's about a specific book, and it's being saved over time. And our final genre we're going to talk about really quickly is a Western. Many libraries see Westerns as a dying genre, but I don't think that's the case anymore. It holds its own. Westerns are books with cowboys, cattle drivers, gunslingers, adventure, and gunplay. Westerns feature a romanticized representation of the West and the problems faced there. We get a feel of the Old West rather than the historical detail that maybe you get in historical fiction. And usually Westerns take place from the end of the Civil War through the beginning of the 20th century. But as you can see, I have Ivan Doig on there, who just recently passed away. And he writes a lot more novels about the history of the West that aren't just set in that Western time period. And that's a large growth area in Westerns. But Westerns in general speak to the basic, deep-seated feelings we have as Americans about the land and the men who brought justice to the wild and the uninhabited country and making it safe for those who civilized it. A Western has a loner hero, like a thriller, who rides in to clean things up and rides out again. The hero doesn't settle down. Sometimes we have real historical characters. There are never a lot of women, unfortunately, but that is the time and place. There are a lot more coming in, and there are a lot more women writing in the West. There's a writers group that works on that. Westerns have a lot of frame, atmospheres, setting detail that make us feel like we're there. But there's also a romantic, nostalgic tone celebrating the past. The plot can be straightforward or complex, but either way, they place the hero in a morality play. Survival and revenge are big themes. Good wins. Redemption is also big. Pacing is varied, but the books are generally not long. There are some notable exceptions there. And the language is colorful but often sparse, like the men who are in those books. They're the men of action, a few words. Richard Wheeler is a great benchmark example. He writes a whole bunch of different series. And then, like I mentioned, Ivan Doig is important to know, even though he just passed. He helped change the way people look at Westerns. And that's a great book for book clubs, by the way. Okay, before we move on to working with the genre readers, which is the fun part of this presentation, I want to just explain to you how you can find the basic genre resources. Because when I turn over to the next set of slides in just a second, I'm going to talk to you about how to keep yourself in genre shape. And this is the things you need to use. I'm going to give you some resources there, but make sure you're going to Novelist because there's up-to-date author, title, and genre information. Every single one of those books I mentioned, you can then go over to Novelist and look up the book and the author and read a much more detailed thing about the author. Then that leads you to read-alikes for that author, and it leads you to articles about the genres, and you start to learn a lot more. So again, that threefold way you're looking at this quick 45-minute talk I just did on the basics of genre, and you're going to mark the ones you need the most work on and start there. And I'm going to show you how to do that next. But the RA Toolbox is on Novelist. It's at the top, and you have amazing genre overviews where you can take each genre and sometimes even subgenres that are really popular and nonfiction too, and look at the key authors. Again, more information about what these authors do, why readers like it, what are the trends, and what are the big books. But you have the basic framework to at least start. It's like I gave you the map to start digging into and exploring the genre. I'm going to help you along the way, though, in a minute. Also, I want to remind you of the Adult Reading Roundtable here in Illinois. Some of you are members, but you don't have to be a member to see the popular author list. It is on Novelist. Soon it's going to be enhanced so you can take a quiz on Novelist and see which genres you do the best in or not. But for right now, you can pull down a PDF and go through a lot more authors in each genre. And it has genre and subgenre definitions. The YA list, if you're a current member, you'll be getting it in December. If not, we just talked to Novelist the other day, and it'll be available on Novelist after January 1. So that's just a little plug for that. That is where you go at the most basic, though, to find information. Okay? We're going to skip the questions now. Remember, you can get to that slide at any time, but I want to really talk to you for the longer part, or for in more detail, about working with genre readers. Again, I know it's a lot. This is usually part of a 3-hour presentation, but I know you guys can do this and on your own. But let's really talk about, we talked about demystifying genre. What are the genres? How are they? How can we think about them? Now let's talk about genre readers and how we can work with them. Okay, do you feel like this today? Hello, my name is Becky, and I'm afraid of genre fiction fans. Look, nothing is scarier than trying to help a fan of a genre that you yourself don't enjoy. Again, I'm going to pick on myself. You want to help that romance reader find the perfect book, but you're having trouble and nowhere to begin. You're afraid that they will find out you're a fraud. How can you possibly help them? And you're saying, oh my God, all I know is those like 6 bullet points Becky gave me. What am I going to do? But I also like to remind you that nothing is more dangerous than assuming it will be easy to help a reader who likes the same genres as you. Why? Because every reader reads a different version of the same book. The reasons you love fantasy, for example, could be nothing like the reason the patron in front of you does. For example, I like dark, character-driven, non-series fantasy, while I have a coworker who loves long series epic fantasy, especially with dragons. If you asked both of us the question, do you like fantasy, we would both eagerly say yes, assuming from the outset that I can help her based solely on the fact that we both like fantasy is actually going to hinder me in my interactions with that person as a reader, because I'll be entering the RA interaction with my own personal preferences of the genre biasing me. Okay, great. Now you're thinking I just made everything more impossible and more difficult. You thought you only had to pay attention to the genres you were less familiar with. You thought I was here to help you. I am. Now, the key is to helping genre readers is to understand the genres and all of the reasons why someone might like them. And then you need to use their enthusiasm for what they love, not your opinion, to help you to match this rabid genre fan with the perfect book. It really isn't as hard as it sounds. The key is that point I made above. As long as you use the reader's enthusiasm, their love of the books they love, to guide you, you cannot fail. Then all it takes is a combination of understanding what questions to ask and where to look for the answers to get you there. Again, what questions to ask would come from those first set of slides. So I gave you, oh no, my computer's doing something crazy, sorry. Sorry about that. The first set of slides, if you don't know the genre, you can pull up those little bullets or make yourself a little cheat sheet. And so if they say they like historical fiction, you can say, well, is it that you like all the detail about the place, or is it about a time period? You ask those key questions. What do you like about fantasy? Is it the world building? Is it, or is it you just like to be transported somewhere where magic rules? Use those things I have in there to ask the questions. But I'm speaking from experience. Again, I am not a romance fan, not even a little. But I love helping romance readers. They're passionate, that pun is intended, about their love of the genre and the specific reasons why they love romance. I get them talking so easily, and I want them to talk to me about why they love romance because I don't love it. So I ask them, is it the specific frames that you like? Is it a type of heat level? You just ask them all those questions, and they'll tell you what they love about romance. You don't have to ask very much. And then I can use their opinions and feelings as a guide to ask the right questions. And then I ask them questions, and they're like, oh, yes, and they'll say more. And I'm going to show you, we're going to go through a crazy romance example, a paranormal romance example, and you'll see how I can do this later. And all of it's on the screen for you. We're going to do it in real time. But you can use their enthusiasm to help you find them the perfect book, and then they love you. And this should be your goal for every Reader's Advisory transaction, working as a team with the reader in front of you to match them with the perfect book for them at that exact moment. Again, it's not about you. It's about them. You and your reading preferences are completely beside the point. They are not relevant in any way. Once you understand this, you are free to help anyone at any time. I really feel like that's a freeing statement. It's not about you. Again, you want to assess where your knowledge gap is based on what they want. What they want is the most important thing. So what I really hit at was the questions you need to ask, because I talked about the appeals, why somebody would like those genres. Those guide you. So, for example, if someone likes suspense, you can ask how they feel about the pacing and or the villain, hero alternating viewpoints, or their favorite author. The patron in front of you will be impressed at how much you know about their favorite author because you asked those questions. All they did is said, well, I really like Lee Child. And you're like, oh, do you like that they're fast-paced and that you get the hero and the villain's point of view? And they'll be like, yes, I do. And then they think you get them. All you are doing is understanding genre conventions, which is half the battle. Okay, you see how this works, right? I walked you through the genres and their specific appeals, but here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to teach you how to keep in genre shape. We're going to do an actual genre reader's advisory conversation together, and I'll talk about understanding the power and limitations of genre. And then at the end, of course, contact info and slides. Okay, keeping in genre shape. So I just want you to remember, you have Novelist. It's there to be used, and it's written by proven RA experts, including myself. So let's make sure we use it. But I really want to spend some time of talking about a plan that works for me. But staying in shape is more than just once in a while going on Novelist or going only when you need to look something up. You need a plan, a workout schedule. For instance, I am a mom who just turned 40, so I know I have to make time to go to the gym. I'm not training for a marathon, but I want to stay healthy. So I put my gym time in my calendar so that I go. I schedule it. This is why not schedule your time for genre training. I'm going to go through this quickly, but the full description of how to do this, my not-so-secret, because I tell everybody, my genre-a-day plan is detailed there. So just listen now. You can go back and take more notes on there. And I have other RA training tips for a great 2015 there, too, and that's part of it. So here's an idea I started using 15 years ago when I got my first real Reader's Advisory job, and it's one I still use for both myself and when I'm training other people. I call it my genre-a-day method. Let me explain. Basically, I take the major genres and reading interests and assign them a day of the week. So here's an example, and I don't necessarily assign them based on the categories I gave you. So like on Monday, I might write down on my sheet, Monday is science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Tuesday is historical westerns and special reading interests. That depends on your service area. For mine, it's like the diverse books. So you want to make sure you're hitting those. For where I was working, it was LGBTQ and urban fiction. Wednesdays, I might have crime, and I'll have all mystery, suspense, thriller, romantic suspense, psychological suspense. Keep going through, blah, blah, blah. And then literary and general fiction I used to work in as time permitted. I got them all into a day. Now, it's on there if you click on the link. But this does not mean that, for example, every single Monday I spend time working on science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Rather, it means that on any given day I am working, that I have some extra time for my own personal continuing education or collection development duties, that I proceed to choose one of those areas and spend time getting up to speed on that genre. Its latest award winners, its biggest trends, its authors, its resources, etc. I'll go to Novelist, or I'll use one of the slides that are coming up with very specific genre resources that I will give you that will help you do that yourself. Again, you can save these slides and do this, no problem. Of course, it is not every week that I have this free time, but you would be surprised how often an hour or so becomes free. And when those random moments do pop up, the schedule provides me for some focused and easy-to-access direction on how to best use that free time to improve my skills, knowledge, and then as a direct result, my service to patrons. Over the years, this method has served me well to get through at least every genre once throughout the course of the year. Again, I'm not doing every Monday. I'm not working on a specific genre. But throughout the course of the year, I get through every genre once. Now, this is just a guide. Let me explain how I make it work in reality for you. Of course, sometimes I happen to have more free time on a specific day of the week than others. That's just how the weeks work. Also, there are a certain number of times a year when updating a specific area makes more sense than others. For example, you want to do graphic novels in July or after because that's when Comic-Con is and all the awards come out. Or maybe you're doing it based on the book list genre spotlight, which always gives you the top books from the year, best reviewed, which is a great resource. Or maybe it's the library journal genre spotlights that come up. How I handle this is I begin each year with the schedule as a clean slate. As I've spent time with the genre, I cross it off the current year's list. By the way, I keep this list in the cloud so I can access it everywhere at any time. Then as the year goes on, I find that I again have free time on a Thursday, but I've already looked at all the genres that day, romance, women's fiction, and gentle reads. So then I move to a genre that has not been crossed off the list yet that's on another day. At the end of each year, I look back to see where I spent the least amount of time, and try to begin there the next year. I actually make myself genre goals at the beginning of each year based on the genres that I left behind the year before. Conversely, I try to hold off on the genres I spend the most time on. So for me, obviously, horror is an ongoing thing that doesn't need much attention. And with my current job running the about-to-end Adult Reading Roundtable Crime Fiction Genre Study, there's no need for me to spend extra time on that area in this year. So even though I've used the same schedule for 15 years, the experience I have with the genres and my own training is unique each and every year. I'm not stuck in a rut only learning about audiobooks on Fridays. Rather, I have a rich and varied experience each year. But most importantly, I have found a way to make my personal continuing education fun and fresh on how to give myself a genre workout. Again, I do have many more links there, the link to what I just talked about and more tips. So that's where you can find that. You can also participate in a genre study. There's a plug there for the Adult Reading Roundtable Genre Study. That's a great way to stay in genre shape. We just are completing the crime fiction one, and on December 3rd we'll be announcing the brand new genre study, so look for that. It'll be starting in February. Now, much of the genre day plan and the other tips I've outlined required that you know about some of the best resources, and that's what we're going to do next. But first, I want to just mention sex and violence. The amount of sex and violence in a book has nothing whatsoever to do with genre. Each genre includes books that fill the entire spectrum of both. Super violent mysteries versus cozy ones are the easiest example. Getting the level of sex and violence wrong when you suggest a book to someone can also ruin their reading experience. To make matters worse, many patrons may not want to be forthcoming about how much sex and violence they can handle. I did have one patron who once famously told me, the bloodier the better. And then another time, same person, the smuttier the better. But this is rare. There's a trick up my sleeve. If you have no idea of the sex and violence but want to check discreetly, get the name of a favorite author from the person in front of you and go here, which is a link to All Readers. It is just allreaders.com, and if you want to write that down to go to it. And I'm not going to show it to you now, like I said. I'm going to trust you to go do the work yourself so I can get through more information. But it clearly shows you sex and violence. If you would like to see it yourself super fast, look up 50 Shades of Grey, and also look up Kiss the Girls by James Patterson, and look up any Susan Elizabeth Phillips. And you'll see how blunt at the very bottom these are on sex and violence. Okay, let's go talk about our resources. You will notice that I have them grouped in the same areas, so I'm going to talk about quickly why you need to go to these resources on top of Novelist when you're doing your genre workout. So if you're talking about the adrenaline genres, and you know, I didn't break up my genres that way because I have to tell you, I made that list way before Joyce's second edition of her book came out, and I just kept them grouped the same way because it was working for me. A super easy way for you to do this is to take the categories and put them each on a day of the week, and then add formats on your last day of the week. So here we go. We have, or just make a list and make sure you'll go through them. You don't have to assign them a day. So if you're going to be doing adrenaline, these are some resources you need to go to. Criminal Element is a blog. What I love about Criminal Element is it considers all areas of crime in both books, movies, and TV shows. So if you really want to get a sense, taking the pulse of where those genres are right now in a very broad perspective and what the trends are currently, this is a great place to go. The Crime Readers Association is a fun place to go because it's one of the only, it's a subdivision of the Crime Writers Association, but it's for readers. The International Thriller Writers is the only place that also represents all areas of adrenaline, but from the writer's perspective. So if you want to see all these writers working together, from Clive Cussler to Louise Penny and everything in between, this is where you go. They also have awards, but they do a lot to write reviews and talk about genre conventions in thrillers, too. And thrillers are all adrenaline. And Spine Tingler Magazine is a great online magazine to stay up on trends. So for all of these resources, what I'm telling you is to use these on those days that you're doing your genre workout for those genres to kind of take the pulse of what's going on. Besides our regular Novelist, library journal, book list, all the stuff we always use, trying to give you a little bit of a sense of where to go outside of your comfort zone. Okay, resources for genres of the intellect. For literary fiction, you should always be aware of the major awards, the major best lists, and this is the time of year to do it. Book club resources, though, are an excellent place to find out what's going on, and the New York Times book section. For mystery, Stop You're Killing Me is the #1 place you need to go. If you've never been to Stop You're Killing Me, you're missing out. It has everything you need, and it thinks like a reader, because you can look up mysteries by the type of job that the protagonist has. You can look it up by their diversity. You can look it up by the time frame for historical mystery people, because sometimes it's so specific, and also lots of resources. For science fiction, 2 places you need to go. Locus Magazine, print and online, provide different things, but the online version specifically is linked there, and it has a great portal to all the resources and awards for everything that could even remotely be speculative in any way. And IO9 is a great online, it's a website, it's an online magazine, it's a place where conversations happen, again, in all media, in all speculative fiction, TV, movies, books. They do book clubs. They even do science stories that seem a little crazy, so nonfiction too. And then for psychological suspense, it's really hard to find out what's new, but if you do a novelist search for psychological and suspense, start clicking around, you'll find a lot. And I have an older genre guide with authors. Okay, moving on to the genres of the emotion. For romance, my 2 favorite places to go are the Romance Writers Association of America. They even have a section for librarians. Go there, learn. And then the Smart Bitches Who Love Trashy Books, they have a book and they have a website. It is so helpful for people who love romance and newbies. They have Help a Bee Bleep Out, where you get to submit questions. They have great where to start with different authors. They have great stuff about trends. It's just where you need to go. For women's fiction, the only resource right now are from Rebecca Vanook, and she has her website there with her books and other things that are helpful for that. Novelist has a Gentle Reads. I double-checked. They still have their A to Z, under Fiction A to Z, Gentle Reads, and they update that regularly with newer titles. And then you can then search within there for click on appeals and find more. But those lists get updated regularly with newer titles. But I really love the way the fans speak on Goodreads, because if you remember when I talked about Gentle Reads, it's about the way the patrons talk about them. Goodreads does a great job. Fans are tagging these books Gentle Reads. You really see a full spectrum of what people consider gentle when you go there and take a look. And because it's crowdsourced and constantly updating, that link will always bring you a new list every day. So if you look at it now and you don't look at it for a year from now, you're going to have a nice snapshot of what Gentle Reads mean to readers. And that's what matters. Not what it means to me telling you, not what it means to you listening to me, what it means to the readers. And then for horror, it's always awkward, but I am the expert on that, and that's my website with links to my book. Okay, resources for genres with a sense of place. I mentioned Locus Magazine already. It's a great place to go for fantasy. I have to make a statement about the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Associations. There's some issues right now. Some people may have heard about them. I don't want to go into it, but you can look up the Hugo controversy. So I'm staying away from giving you those as resources. Locus Magazine is a great place to start. For historical fiction, Reading the Past is a book and a website done by Sarah Johnson, who's a librarian at Eastern Illinois. Her website is fantastic, the Reading the Past website, because in the left gutter, she has every possible resource you could ever need for historical fiction. She is the expert. She knows everything about it and has extensive archive. So you just need to know that one website, and then you can spend time, a rabbit hole of hours of learning about historical fiction. She's also one of the editors or on the board for the Historical Novel Society, and they have a wonderful website with reviews and talk about issues and trends. That doesn't take you very long to just take a snippet and take a look at that and see what's coming up. But if you have historical fiction questions, Sarah will answer them too. And finally, with Westerns, the Western Writers of America have done a fantastic job making themselves be relevant. 5 years ago, this was not the case. Their website has been updated. They give out the Spur Award. They've been more inclusive of books that are novels about the West, that aren't just strict Westerns. They used to be very strict. It had to be Civil War to early 20th century. It had to have gunplay, da-da-da-da-da. They are not, because readers are opening up, and they are opening up. Again, the readers have driven it, and they've responded in ways that are, you might think you know Westerns or you know enough. You don't. You probably have a ton of readers who would love sort of the quote-unquote new face of Westerns. And they're doing a great job trying to get that message out. So please take a look at that. I have a feeling that's a place where a lot of people need to do some work. I know I always do. Okay, So that is where you're going to go later and do your resources when you do your genre workouts. But let me talk about a genre reader's advisory conversation. We're actually going to do one right here for the end of this presentation, which is the whole point of this. So now you have your workout plan. You've been working out. Your genre muscles are flexed and strong. And the big day is here. That Sherilyn Kenyon fan walks up to you. You know from your training that, okay, Sherilyn Kenyon, yeah, she writes steamy paranormal romances. I've seen her listed somewhere. But yikes, you've never read any steamy paranormal romances. Do not fear. You are ready. Here is your step-by-step guide. Now, you have done some of your research, so you've at least heard of Sherilyn Kenyon, and you know that paranormal romances is popular, so you've at least heard of her. First thing you got to do, admit defeat. When you are less familiar, say to them, you know what? I know who Sherilyn Kenyon is, but I am not necessarily an expert in Sherilyn Kenyon. How are we going to do this? Well, you need to tell me why you love this person. You get them talking. While the person's talking, you quickly pull up the novelist entry on the author or book and use the RA options to suggest a book you're pretty sure they have read. I'm going to do this with you in a second, okay? But let's hear me out here. We're going to walk through this. And you're going to earn their trust because you're going to go in there and we're going to see that Christine Feehan shows up super early. You're going to be like, oh, do you like Christine Feehan? And they're going to be like, yes. Oh, how did you know that? And you're going to earn their trust, and you're going to use the words in front of you on the screen to earn their trust and as a guide. Rely on all that effort you've put into staying in genre shape to boost your confidence. This is why you train. So when the competition day comes, you are ready to do your best. Remember what I said at the beginning. You're working as a team. This is not about you in any way. It's about the reader in front of you, what he or she likes, and how to find him or her another book they would also enjoy. It's all about them. It's a conversation, not the reader's advisory reference interview. Conversation requires both sides to keep it going. You gain trust quickly and then include the patron in the search. I often bring people around to my side of the desk and have them help me search. This is better if you have iPads because then you can stand on neutral ground together and it takes away the barrier of who's the expert and you're really having a conversation. But you need to remember that when you get a reference question and someone comes up to you and asks you a reference question, neither you nor them expect that you will know the answer as soon as they ask you the question. Both of you have been trained over time and years to know that the patron knows, I will ask, the librarian has the expertise to find me the answer. I will wait while that librarian finds me the answer. The same can happen when we deal with readers. That expectation, you need to allow yourself that. You need to say, hey, we're going to do this together. We're going to work as a team, and I'm going to trust in my training and get this for you. You're going to have much more fun working with genre readers. They're going to be less scary to you if you give yourself a break and know that you don't have to know it all. So what I'm going to do, and I forgot to pull it up ahead of time, but that's okay. We're going to go to novelist. La, 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 la. I should have pulled it up ahead of time. Sorry. And we're going to take a look at Sherilyn Kenyon because this is, you'll see, this is easy. You can put this in front of the screen without a blink. So the person is coming up to you right now and saying, oh, yes, I just finished Sherilyn Kenyon, and I really want more books. And you're like, oh, okay, oh, my goodness, it's paranormal romance. They're sexy. I don't know anything. Look how fast that came up right now. Well, you right now know that Sherilyn Kenyon is a leading writer in paranormal romance. Phew, I wasn't wrong. Offering readers an addictive blend of mythology, magic, and sexy love stories. You read this very quickly. So you say, to that person right here, say, oh, so you like paranormal romances? Yes, I do. Do you like that there are strong female characters? Oh, I really do, yes. Do you like that they are fast-paced and steamy? Do you like that they're compelling? And they keep saying, yeah, oh, my God, yes, yes. And then you right away say, okay, do you like Christine Feehan? You always want to pick an author you're pretty sure they know, and your first one is a good place to go. So if you hover right there, you can see the description of why. If the description is signed by someone, the reason, that means that a person did it, not a computer. I'm going to show you a computer one, and here's why. But the top one is usually the one that has the strongest matches. So what you're doing is saying, well, Feehan's books are a little bit more darkly graphic and have more of an edge, but they really have a highly developed mythic world and use strongly bonded characters and interconnected stories. Look how smart you sound. You're reading the screen. The patron is excited. Yes, but I've already read Christine Feehan. That's how you gain trust. So then you start going down to other ones. Here's one to show you. Oh, they all are signed on this one. They weren't the other day. Let me see if this one is not. Yeah, here, oh, they are. But some of them won't have that. They just added that because she's so popular. You can say, but maybe that person has read all these authors on here. But you can go to the bottom and start clicking the things that are most important to that person. So you can click, well, do you like that they're steamy and that they're paranormal? Well, let's go see what other authors I can get. Or do you want to go into lists and articles and go see other things? Anyway, the point is you can move the person around, and when you start clicking on things such as paranormal romance that are steamy and compelling, if they're like, that's the things I like the most, well, let's see what the computer can find you. And you're making it like a reference in transaction that you're showing them where to go, and then you can start reading, and here we're getting teen also. So we can limit it to not, but sometimes with these I like teen. So we can say, what about Cressley Cole? Oh, I haven't read Cressley Cole. Well, let's take a look at Cressley Cole and Cressley Cole's books. And then you can start going through and reading and working together. Okay, now, I have also picked Sherilyn Kenyon because she is an author who people really, really like. And when they like her, they read everybody who's even similar to her a little bit. So I've used this plan to help genre readers hundreds of times, but at least 25% of the times, things go well for a bit, but then their expertise, and then again, that is why I picked Sherilyn Kenyon, their expertise trumps mine. And everything even that novelists can give me, I can't get anything more for them. And I picked Sherilyn Kenyon too because a lot of these readers read a lot of self-published books also. So it's time to call in the cavalry, and the cavalry is Ganooks. And I'm going to show you, because it has never failed me, you can do this for any author, but this is the map of Sherilyn Kenyon. Look at that thing go crazy. Just have fun looking at it. But it starts putting a whole bunch of authors. This is computer-generated by readers. They put in their favorite authors, and this comes up. But there's our friend Cressley Cole again, who I am less familiar with, but I've had success using this method to suggest. But look, we even get things like Jim Butcher, Janet Ivanovich, Nora Roberts, things that are on the further away they are from the person in the middle, the fewer connections that readers have had between them. But pulling this screen up, I call it calling in the cavalry. You can bring up a whole bunch more authors and keep the conversation going. So there is that. Let us go to our next slide. Okay, so that is the next point I want to make, because sometimes it takes you in a different direction. And one of the final points I want to make is that when you help genre readers, the biggest trend in all genres today is genre blending. I know I've been breaking down the minutiae of each genre and talking about their specific resources, but the kick in the gut is that this is the biggest trend right now, genre blending. I kind of cheated by using Sherilyn Kenyon in my last example because I introduced this point one slide too early, but let me explain this honestly because it's going to help you. Yes, I want you to understand what makes a genre, because in learning this, you will be able to better navigate the spaces between them. The first thing to remember, and think of yourself here, is that readers don't only read one genre of fiction, one fiction genre. Even the biggest mystery fan in the world reads authors in suspense once in a while. Many horror readers love psychological suspense and dark fantasy, and those three genres were in different categories. Readers may not even classify themselves as a reader of a genre as you work with them. You might realize they have genre preferences, but if they are not offering to label the books they like on their own, don't do it for them. I talked about this a little. I talked about historical fiction. Keep the information and your suspicions to yourself and use them to help you tackle the problem at hand, finding this reader a book. So, for another example is they may call themselves, for example, a romance reader, but they actually like women's lives because they're talking about, they're not talking about the happily ever after. So it's equally important to remember that while authors are definitely much more cognizant of genre than we might think they are, because they are, they're not also constrained by it. Readers love certain authors even when those authors cross genre lines. There's a reason above genre that these readers enjoy. It's not as if genres are surrounded by electric fences and the writers or the readers have to get zapped in order to cross genres. That might sound silly, but I have found that people feel that way almost. When you call them out and you say when I'm doing trainings, you're not going to get zapped, or the readers aren't going to get zapped if you offer them a book in a different genre. It's not a war zone between the genres. it's hard you lose sight of that fact when you spend this much time talking about the minutia, because genre is a tool. So tools help us, like a hammer or a screwdriver, but they need you, the person, to use them in order to fix things. A really great way to look at this is by reading Michael Chabon's book, Maps and Legends. It's a nonfiction book. It's at all of your libraries. Chapter 1 is Trickster in a Suit of Lights. He is a master at genre blending, Michael Chabon, and the first chapter is all about looking to the borderlands where genres blend for some sure bet books. And he really talks about how that's where things really happen, is on those borderlands. It's a great read, just the first chapter. It's like 14 pages to really get you to understand why genre matters and doesn't matter at the same time. But I'd like to end with a slide with some popular books that do happen on those borderlands before I open it to questions and a conclusion and questions. So Neil Gaiman is an author that came up already, and Stephen King. Both of them write darker books that defy genre. Neil Gaiman goes to horror and fantasy and even moves between age groups, whereas Stephen King writes pure, straight-out mysteries, science fiction, psychological suspense, and horror. Margaret Atwood's a great example, and she has a brand new book. She really writes literary fiction that has a huge speculative element these days. Her newest book is a great example. Where do you put her? Does it matter? She's writing on that borderland. She's writing in between. Cormac McCarthy is another author who combines crime, Western, and even a little bit at times of crime, a lot of thriller, and even with The Road, a little bit of horror. Kelly Link is a great example of short stories being written that really aren't able to fit into any genre at all. She also edits a lot of collections that win awards that do that. If you really just want to see somebody who has found a niche at just being in those borderlands and really playing with genre, it's Kelly Link. Jonathan Lessom's one of my favorite examples because he's won many literary awards, but he has books that are science fiction. He does graphic novels, hard-boiled fiction, essays, short stories. He does everything. And China Mieve, who has a brand new book coming out in January also, who does fantasy, horror, science fiction, steampunk, and urban fantasy. I mentioned the Adult Reading Roundtable popular author list. China Mieve is the epitome of why lists like that are great and terrible. We tried to put major authors who are super popular into their genre categories. We couldn't find a category for this man, and this man needed to be on the list because he's extremely popular at libraries. So we created an entire category just for him and made other people fit in it. So those are great examples of books on the borderlands. And here are 4 titles that you have at your library that are really great borderland picks. If you click on the covers, as you see, it will take you to a longer review that I have written about these books. And I do talk about how they fit the genre. Sorry that it skipped ahead. How they fit into their genres, too. The Sisters Brothers is crime and Western and historical, all molded into one. The Gollum and the Ginny is sort of a fairy tale fantasy and historical fiction. The Last Policeman is the beginning of a series that's a set of pre-apocalyptic novels. Yes, that's what I said, pre-apocalyptic, and a mystery. And then Jasper Fforde is just the book lover's world's greatest friend because he takes literary fiction and fantasy and mystery and puts them all together. And so those are some great books on the borderlands. These are popular, critically acclaimed, major award winners, and not a single one of them stays in their genre pen. Readers love these books. These are all very popular. These authors are popular. These 4 books I have on the screen are, like I said, books that you have at your library that I give out as sure bets. Yes, I'm giving genre-blended books as sure bets because they hit at what is most appealing about those genres. People love to read stories with some genre convention because they feel like they know where it's going. But what's great about these genre-blending books is they add a little surprise twist. So genre readers are the reason that you do this job. Okay? There are so many books and so many readers. I hope today I gave you a quick overview of how to help those readers, but most importantly, how to keep yourself in genre shape. You demystify the genres, you demystify helping the readers. You can do this, but please go back and look at what I've gone over and find the places where there are the most gaps for you so that you can go back and ask for more training of yourself, of me, or of others and find a way to do that so that you can improve your knowledge. So I will take any questions now or at any time at that email. And if you go to RA for All, you will always find the slides. You just have to type in Demystifying Genre, and these will pop up. They're also under my recent presentations. And I always am doing tips and tricks for keeping up to date on genres. And you can use genre-specific tags on the right for updates. So if you want to see the last time I posted on fantasy because you decided after this talk that you need to really learn about fantasy, you didn't even know who George R.R. Martin was. Oh, no. So you're going to go to fantasy. If you click on fantasy, you'll get the most up-to-date information there. And again, go to those slides on those resources. Okay, so I'll take any questions. I know this was a lot of information.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Becky, as always. A lot of good information. And as Becky alluded to, you know, we will, later this week, we'll have this presentation archived up on the Rails website on our Continuing Education Archives page. We'll include links to Becky's blog and specifically to the slides if you want to go back and refer to some of those resources. And of course, if you had any colleagues that couldn't be with us today that you want to share this with, we hope that you will do that. And as Becky also said, there'll be a survey coming to your inbox in the next 24 hours. So we would love to hear, particularly if there are any specific genres you're interested in learning more about, going into a little deeper, or really anything in the Reader's Advisory realm. We like to get that feedback, so please look for that survey and participate. It certainly helps us. But we do have just a few minutes, so I haven't seen any questions roll in, but I will give it one final call for any questions for Becky.
And while people are doing that, I could just make a comment. Again, I know you guys, it was a lot to listen to, and I really hope you go back and look at those slides in your own time, because this is something where you can hear all about it today, but you have to really take a brain-clearing moment and sit down again and think about yourself, your staff, and your patrons' needs, and figure out where to start.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I imagine maybe some people got to get on the reference desk now, so I understand that. So we will conclude today's webinar, but thank you, everybody. Thank you, Becky, once again. And enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.